In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. This phrase from one of Tolkien's most famous works embodies the tale from my family and its connection to art and the toils of creating and creation. My grandmother, Dorothy Dupree Carmack, used to tell stories of the fairies and the sprites that lived in the woods when my sister and I were young. And when my grandparents moved to Lake Martin, to a wooded lot with greenery all around, her stories became part of the real world that we saw at their lake house. One of my favorite memories from this time was when she let us paint the small outhouse building used for tools for the fairies. This began my love of painting. Painting became a part of our everyday lives as my mother, a gifted painter herself, continued to offer my sister and I opportunities to paint. She was a picture framer by trade, and thus we had a built-in way to exhibit our paintings. Over the years, my love for painting, among other creative arts, theater, dance, and home project building, flourished, and I wanted to pass on not only the beautifully magic stories of the fairies in the forest, but I also wanted to pass on that love for painting and creating. Neither of my kiddos got to meet or interact with my grandmother because she passed away when I was young. So I would tell my children stories of fairies and magic in the woods. I would take them, my kids Michael and McKenna, to Aldridge Gardens where they had an actual fairy space. I would take them to the Birmingham Botanical Gardens, and our favorite area was the Fairy Garden. I'm not really sure if it's actually called the Fairy Garden, but I called it that because it's the one that has all the greenery with the ferns and the natural wooded and rocked areas. We would return home from these visits and build fairy furniture out of sticks and leaves and flowers and all kinds of natural things we could find outside. I added painting to this world building as well, and both my children picked up a love for painting and creating as a way to connecting to the arts. My children and I have, throughout the years, enjoyed time together painting and making crafts. Both of my children have their own styles, and I have loved to see them develop their own artistic creativity. My son, who is a game warden now for the state of Alabama, is a true outdoorsman, and his art always revolves around fish. My daughter, a current college student, uses an earthy style in her art, and although much of her art is very personal and not to be shared, I have a couple of pictures to show you as well with her. My mother continues to paint in her spare time, and I have a work of hers to show as well. And back to that hole in the ground that I started with, I have a work to share of mine as well. So this is a piece that my son did. As I said, he loves fish, and even as a young kiddo, he did pointillism, fish in pointillism. He did some watercolors. He does fish of all sorts, and this is one of our favorites. Again, my mother frames, so we have ability to have these framed and put on our walls now, but this is one of his fish. And then I have a couple of pieces from my daughter. Again, her pieces are usually very personal, but she has painted things for me. One, she painted, if you can't tell, this is me. So she took a picture and did a watercolor of this one. And then this was just kind of a really low-key birthday gift wrapping painting. So it's a bag, but she painted some watercolors around it as well. And this is a painting from my mother. She has all types of styles as well. She paints with acrylics and oils and watercolors, but this is one that she did, bottle of wine, that actually I have framed in my office here. And this is one of my more recent ones. During COVID, one of the things that we did as a family, we painted on newspapers. So this is one of mine that we did, or that I did, on a newspaper during, I guess it was March or April of 2020. But again, like I started with, this is the hole in the ground from which the love of art started. Art comes from a place of magic for me, sometimes light, sometimes dark, but my family art story comes from a connection to the fairy legends that exist in whispers and fantasies. And it continues in the creations that come from the toils of our hands.